All right, so the three themes of Rosh Hashana, which form the heart of the Musaf, again, Malchus, Zichronis, and Shofris. Sorry. There's no one here. So a kingship, again, remembrances and shofar. So these form the heart of the Musaf prayer, and the shofar is sounded both when the individual says the Amidah, the Musaf, and then again at the end of each of these three sections. And again, when the Chazan repeats the Shliach Tzibur, Chazan actually is a misnomer. It's not a term really for the person who is leading the service. It's Shliach Tzibur. Chazan means something else actually. Shliach Tzibur means the emissary of the congregation, or Shatz is the abbreviation. It's come to be referred to as the Chazan. Truth is, I only heard that when I came here to Canada. People referring to the person leading the service as the Chazan. It's a Shliach Tzibur. So the Shliach Tzibur, when he repeats the Amidah, the Musaf, it is the shofar is also sounded. So we were learning here the two opinions, two halachic opinions, as to the relationship between these three brachas. So this part you'll just listen. Another part I have a text for you. The three brachas and the blowing of the shofar. According to Rashi, Rashi's reading of the Talmudic text. So Rashi's understanding, and we explained last week, I won't repeat this again, why in Torah continuously the text is ambiguous and lends itself to different understandings, because both understandings and more are intended to begin with. So Rashi reveals that the meaning is that the sounding of the shofar requires to fulfill that mitzvah. That Torah says sound the shofar. So handed down, that's in the Torah itself. That's written. Very vaguely also, mind you. But handed down orally with the instructions how you blow the shofar, plus you should also say and make mention of these three themes. And they are one package. So if a person does not say Malchus, Zichronis, and Shofaris, don't blow the shofar. If you're going to blow the shofar, you intend to blow the shofar without saying Malchus, Zichronis, and Shofaris, don't blow the shofar. In other words, one without the other is incomplete. Either you say all of them blow the shofar or nothing. So it means practically, as we explained last week, if a person has a shofar, doesn't have a machzor, and doesn't know the prayers by heart, no mitzvah can be done. Likewise, if a person has a machzor but not a shofar, so he might think, at least I'll say the three prayers. No, they are in vain, not to be said, and only said if you're blowing the shofar. That's the opinion of Rashi. The halacha is not this way, the practical ruling. The ruling is like Tosfos and like the Rambam and other Rishonim, who say that the meaning of the Gemara, who explain the Gemara differently. The Gemara means to say something else, and that is that within Malchis, Zichronis, and Shofars, and within the blowing of the shofar, it's a complete package. Namely, if you have, but they're two separate mitzvahs. They're two separate mitzvahs. They complement each other. Ideally, should be done together. But if you only have a machzor, then say the Malchis, Zichronis, and Shofars. If you only have a shofar, blow the shofar. When the Gemara talks about dependence, it means within each mitzvah. The key word is what's dependent on what. It's vaguely expressed intentionally to yield these two possible and more, or at least these two interpretations or two understandings. So the second one is that within Malchis, Zichronis, and Shofars, you have to say all three. So if your machzor is missing one of the sections, don't say any of them. You got to say all three or nothing within Malchis, Zichronis, and Shofars. Likewise, shofar blowing. If you have a shofar, you know how to blow tekiah. You don't know how to blow Shvarim in Teruah. Don't blow. Don't make the blessing of a blowing and don't blow because you've done nothing. So that's what the Gemara means when it talks about independence. It means not that the two are dependent on each other. It's within each one each one has several parts. They're independent dependent on each other. Clear? And that's the ruling, as you all know. Chabad goes around blowing shofar for the whole world. We don't make people say Malchus, Sichonis, and Shofaris. They don't even know it exists. We just blow the shofar. It's better to. It augments. It contributes, but they're two separate mitzvahs. That's the final halacha. But there is an opinion, Rashi, that says no, that you need to say these blessings and then blow. Otherwise, the blowing has no meaning. Now, to understand that a little bit, we're going to share with you on page 183 of Chelik Lamed Daled. You'll hear two famous parables. One by the Baal Shem Tov, and if it's all you remember is this, it's also good. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder, of course, of the Hasidic movement, and the other by Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Barditchev, who was an early Hasidic master and a contemporary of the Alter Rebbe. He was in generation number 3. Both giants and founders of the Hasidic movement. Baal Shem Tov being the founder, and Rabbi Levi Yitzchak being one of the early masters. Interestingly enough, as an aside, there's no dynasty that descends from him. He didn't start at a Bistava, which is very telling. So here is I will translate it word for word, the marshal of the Baal Shem Tov. Heads up, the two Mesholim, one brings out Malchias, and the other brings out Zichronis. The connection, in other words, two things. One brings out the content of Malchias and the connection to Shofar, and the other, the content of Zichronis and the connection to Shofar, which explains the Rashi view, why one is integral to the other. So let me share with you the mashal, or rather the Mesholim. Number one, the Baal Shem Tov. So direct translation here, as quoted in the book Keser Shem Tov, the crown of the good name. Literally, these are teachings that the Baal Shem Tov taught. He did not write. Baal Shem Tov didn't write his teachings. He spoke in Yiddish, and they were written down by his disciples. There was a king who had an only child who was accomplished, scholarly, and endeared to the king like the apple of his eye, literally. It occurred to the father and the son. It's interesting that this is a decision made by both, that he should travel to other countries for two purposes. One, to learn other wisdoms, to become familiar with the conduct of men in different societies. And also implied there is he should also bring the sophistication and the teachings of the palace of the capital. For this purpose, his father, the king, gave him ministers and meshorisims, the attendants, and great wealth, that he should go and tour, journey in these countries and islands, distant islands, in order that the son, should reach this great virtue more than he could reach being by his father's house in the palace. And it came to pass with the passage of many days that all that his father had given him were spent on expenses for his delicate or indulgent, relatively speaking, but I would say delicate, really, needs for which he was accustomed. That's how it began. But the main problem, I guess, the loss of all of the entourage and all of the funds was because he added desire upon desire. In each place that he went, he simply became. Pardon? yeah, he became part of the problem rather than the solution. If there was a problem, and indulged and simply discovered desires that he didn't know existed and pleasures in the palace. It reached a point that he's now impoverished and was forced to sell to what's what I'm looking for. It's a monetary word. He was forced to anybody? He's selling, not sell. Yeah, he's selling. He had to sell, but he had to pay off. There's a word. Meanwhile, he's arrived now to a very distant country. So distant that they didn't even know of his father at all. Now, there's two dots here, so there's more to the story. We're not getting it, not relevant. But his great pain and anguish, because he hit rock bottom, it seems. And that's why there is a rock bottom. Because it's from there that we have no choice but to ascend. So there occurred to him that he should return to his father's country, his father's palace. Because of the lengthy time that he'd been away and so on, he forgot even the language of his native country. When he came back to the country, what could he do? He couldn't communicate because even the language and certainly his conduct was not reflective of where he returned to back home, but even the language he'd forgotten. And he starts to gesture that I am the king's son, and he's, if I'm not mistaken, he's viewed as a lunatic. Yeah, that's it. Remember the story. Until he arrives at the actual courtyard of the king, the courtyard, and again he's gesturing, and now he's desperately that he is the prince, he's the king's son, and no one pays any attention. He's dismissed. Till he begins to cry out with a great voice that the king should recognize his voice, which the king does, and says, but this is the cry of my child. Recognizing also that it's coming from the depth of him. And this arouses within the father his love. He embraces him and kisses him and so on. End of parable. The point of the parable is that the neshamas, the story of each one of us, each neshama is Hashem's only child. And by consent, interesting, back to the parable, it's the father, the king and the son. The neshama descends into the world in order to achieve the true heights, to the challenges, to the distant, coming to the distant island, and there to learn from this world. There's much to be learned from this world that heaven is clueless about. And moreover, there's to bring heaven to this world. It's a dual mission. As in, just for example, the 7 lessons that Lord Abzushavanapala learned from a thief in the service of God. Such lessons are not to be acquired in heaven. There's no theft in heaven. But that, beautiful for Hayom Yom, not for now. So it's a dual purpose, to learn from this world, to exploit it, in other words, and use and learn from it and channel the craziness of this world in holiness. This world is a crazy place. Heaven is not crazy. Heaven is beautiful, not crazy. But a true relationship is crazy. True love is crazy. So he has to learn that madness here, and it's a dual mission by bringing heaven to earth, palace to the world, to the distant island, the distant country. But he gets distracted and waylaid and so on. So the mission was through mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim to ascent after ascent, as we just described, far beyond the soul's station in heaven. But because he gets caught up in the body's desires and loves and weaknesses, and as we've discussed many times, the soul fuses with the body. It fuses with the body. So therefore, the body's desires become acquired in a very intimate way by the soul. It's confusing. It's confusing for us because we feel these deep stirrings and longings, and we think that all it is physical physical gratification, power, money, lust, whatever, and the soul's drawn into it. But really, it's really coming from a much deeper place. And the soul's drawn into it in the end because it's through all of this that it'll attain its greatest height. Anyway, it's multi-layered and very textured, and extremely nuanced. We won't go into all the detail now, but you get the general idea. So the bottom line is that the soul, as it looks at itself and says, what's become of me? What's become of me? I've forgotten everything, almost forgotten the mission, forgotten the language. There's no transcendence, there's no spirituality, there's no holiness, I've forgotten even the language. And all that's left is to cry out with a simple, inarticulated cry. And that, says the Baal Shem Tov, is the cry of the shofar, which is the call from the inner depth of the heart, the deep regret on the past, and the resolution that from now on, I will listen to my Father's voice and the great mission entrusted to me for my own good and for my Father's great purpose. And through this deep cry, this arouses from the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, even a deeper love. And He shows this love and endearment to His only child and forgives him over the past, ... That's the moshel of who? Of the Baal Shem Tov. Now the moshel, the parable of the great Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev, the great lover of Israel. A very different parable. And that is a king, an earthly king that traveled once to a great forest. And he gets lost in the forest till he comes to the depth of the forest and cannot find his way back to his palace. He sees there in the forest simple forest dwellers, and he asked them, where is the way back to the capital city, to the palace? They didn't recognize that he was the king and couldn't answer him because they never knew of the way back. They're not interested in any way out of the forest. This is their world and this is their life. And so they don't know there is even a path, a way out of the forest. Till he finds a wise and understanding person and asks him, the king is wandering and he encounters this person and asks him, what is the way back to the palace? And this wise, understanding person understood that this is the king. And he is dazeya la'achira, which means he trembles and steps back. You'll soon see the illusion of this, the trembling and the stepping back. And immediately he acquiesces to agrees to the king's desire and shows him the way. Because of his great wisdom, he knew the way, the proper way, the nochen, proper and correct path. And he accompanies the king to his palace. And these are the words he uses here, the Barditchev. And he, this wise, understanding man, is the one that places the king back on his royal throne. And this person finds, of course, great favor in the king's eyes and is appointed to be one of his chief minister. However, with the passage of time, one day, this fellow sinned against the king. And the king was very angry, very disappointed and very angry. And the king instructed that he be judged. He instructed those who in the inner cabinet that he be judged as one who rebels against the king. Of course, there's the most drastic consequence. Now, this fellow hearing this was very pained because he knows that his judgment is chorotz. It means it's engraved, it's fixed, and it's not a good one because of his sin. He falls before the king to ask for mercy. No, doesn't ask for mercy. You don't ask for mercy when you understand. That's another line in that song. But he has another request. What's the request? That before they execute the judgment, he has one request, and that is, he wants to be dressed and clothed in those garments that he wore when he took and led the king out of the forest. And the king also should wear those same garments that he wore. I guess he may have gone there hunting, so it's not the clothes that he wears in the palace. His crown and his kingly robe. So both of us should dress up as we first met. So the king agreed to this final request, as it were. And of course, this aroused that the king should remember the great kindness that this fellow had done with him, that returned him to his palace and placed him on his throne. And he's overcome with compassion. And he finds once again, he's now endeared and chen, grace and chesed. He forgives him and he restores him to his former position. End of parable. This is a parable, says the Badicheva, for the giving of the Torah. The giving of the Torah, our sages tell us, Hashem came to the world, this dark forest, and he asked all the nations of the world, who will accept my Torah? Who will accept my Torah? It doesn't explain the detail of who will lead me back to the palace, but the implication is, by accepting my Torah and following its commandments, you'll transform the palace to be part of the realm. The forest to be part of the realm. But it falls on deaf ears. What? Who are you? What commandments? What are you talking about? Came to the Germans, he said, will you accept my Torah? He said, no, what does it say there? He said, you shall not kill. No, thank you. Went to the French. What does it say there? You have to live moral lives, family purity. No, thank you. And so on. He says, it was rejected by all the nations of the world, but there was one people, and that is the Jewish people. And we accepted Hashem's Torah with joy and with delight, so much so that we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will accept it and we will understand it, placing our commitment to observe even before we understand, to carry out his mitzvahs and commandments of his holy Torah. But we sinned and rebelled, and therefore we blow the shofar, because the shofar reminds, as it were, invokes that moment of acceptance. And the Torah was given, the Torah describes of a great shofar sound. That's what it says. A great sound that didn't stop. In order that we should remember how we accepted the Torah. And that was a coronation of God as our God. And through this remembrance, both of us, we remembering, and as Hashem, as it were, recalling, as it were, he forgives us for all our transgressions and writes us into the book of life immediately. End of Moishe. So the Rebbe says that these two Mashalim, one is for Malchus and one is for Zichronis. One explains Malchus and one explains Zichronis. The Mashal of the Baal Shem Tov, the focus there is reigniting the connection to the king, the fundamental relationship. My father, the king, Avinu Malkeinu. He had forgotten the language. And now the cry of the shofar is what reconnects that essential bond. What Zichronis? Zichronis is God remembering and judging us. So this is related to the commandments. Here it's the reaffirmation of the commitment to the commandments of the king. Here's the difference. The first one is the essential bond. That's the parable of the Baal Shem Tov. And the second one that evokes, we accepted your Torah, we got distracted, but we are now reaffirming our acceptance of your commandments. So these are these two aspects, the king and his commandments. Clear? How these two parables express that. The first parable, he forgot that he has a father altogether. In the second parable, there's no forgetting the king. He's a minister in the king's cabinet. He did something he shouldn't do. Not distant, a distant land in a distant country, and he forgot, and now he remembers he's a child, wants to come back, and that's the first parable, the essential bond. The second one was transgressing a commandment while you're right there. So it's a reaffirmation, teshuvah, a reaffirmation of the commandments, remembering that we'd accepted it and renewal of that. So that's zichroinus. So now we understand why. We have a deeper understanding. Rashi's position. It's not the halacha, but it's a legitimate position that we need to appreciate. And even the other view says, you should say all of this when you blow the shofar. But not critical, they're two separate things. We're explaining Rashi is because that shofar sound has to come as a consequence. It's a sound out of nowhere. The shofar sound after Malchias has to come after this meditation of what is this sound is. I am yours, the coronation of God as king. And then the shofar sound after Zichroinus has to come after the meditation, and I'm recommitting myself to observe your commandments as we did at Sinai, and recommitting ourselves again in an ever deeper way now. So we understand how they're indispensable to each other, that the physical sound is a result of this whole internal awakening, turmoil, virtuous turmoil, on these two levels of the essential bond and the commitment to the commandments, to the directives of the king.
Could it be that both are getting to Malchus? One's shofar, one's the praise.
That's what we're saying. What?
Could it be that both Moshe lead to Malchus? The Baal Shem Tov through shofar, the cry, the etzem, and the Badichva is to remember the praise.
Yeah, but the shofar, but even the Badichva says the sound of the shofar that evokes that. That's the shofar of the Matan Torah. So the sound of the shofar, in other words, as if to say, there are two meanings to the sound. Let's make it clear. The first meaning of the sound is, I'm yours. You're my king. I'm your child. Avinu Malkeinu. A reaffirmation of the essential bond. The second sounding of the shofar, when we blow it a second time by Zichroinus, what does it mean then? And I'm committed to the commandments. The bond is a given. It's the loyalty to the mission, the commandments. That's the emphasis. There's elements of both in both. But what's the emphasis? The emphasis is altogether. First one is I am a Jew. I'm affirming I'm a Jew and I'm yours. I'm a part of you. That's the Baal Shem Tov's mashal. That's Malchias. The Badichva's mashal is come second. Yes, I'm Jewish, and therefore I'm recommitting to your commandments. It's the commandments given at Sinai, the mitzvahs that we are now recommitting to us. And the whole parable there, didn't go to a distant place and didn't forget who he was. He just ate Sahara. He just didn't do what he has to do. So the focus is there is not the essential connection, but rather the whole focus there is in the parable of the Badichva. It is the commandments, the commitment to the. So it's two things there for Rosh Hashana. These two soundings. Now, what's the third sounding then? Shofaris. We might add. What are you supposed to think then? We're giving you material for meditation. You're going to be in shul, I hope. And even if you're not, you'll say this at home. You'll hear the shofar later, but you're going to be saying it at home. So what's shofaris? So Malchias is again my core identity. This is who I am. Zichroinus is, and therefore I will act accordingly. I'll commitment to the mitzvahs. And shofar is the third theme. The third theme, if you look at what it all talks about, is shofar is a revelation, culminating in the great shofar that sounds before Mashiach comes, which is actually sounding already spiritually. Meaning to say, as a result of 3 steps, my affirmation of who I am, my commitment to the commandments, this will lead to redemption, personal redemption and collective redemption. That's the third theme. Shofar, the great sound, the great awakening, the great teshuvah, the God's presence revealed on earth, and all the verses that are quoted there in the third section of Shofars. As we said last week, the 3 sections are made up of 10 verses. 10, each one of them is the same template, 10 verses. 3 from Torah, 3 from Nevi'im, 3 from Ksuvim, the 10th from Torah. Tanakh, 3, and the 10th one, again from Chumash again. Chumash, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. So you look at the theme of Shofars, the third one, The whole is the sound, the great shofar, and redeem us. It's the culmination of it all, Hashem's revelation on earth. And likewise, when God was revealed at Sinai, the emphasis there is God's revelation, not our acceptance, but Hashem being revealed. All to say that the theme of shofars is per se is revelation. So let's have now 3 catchwords to remind us of the 3 levels or messages of the shofar. As I'm talking to you, I'm trying to formulate these words. You can help me. Just one word for each one. We need like a little symbolic word. So Malchias is I'm Jewish, or I'm yours. I'm yours. Zechroinus is I will do. Right? First one is I am, I will do. I'm committed to observing the mitzvahs more, both in quantity and quality, now than ever before in my life. First one is I'm embracing my core identity as a Jew in a deeper way than I ever did in my life. It defines me. It's my whole essence. My core essence. I am yours. I am Jewish. That's Malchus. Zechroinus, I will do. I'm the commitment to do. And Shofarus, as a result of this, your revelation here on earth. An integral, therefore, I'm adding now, to Shofarus is the silent plea and cry, also part of the shofar sound. How much longer? How much longer will you be concealed and not reveal your presence on earth? Let us merit already the ultimate realization of all of this, and that is your kingdom revealed here on earth. Mashiach, in simple terms. So we got it? I am, I will do, and the result of all of that is your purpose realized, heaven on earth, Hashem's kingdom on earth. That is the final theme of shofars. So that's something we can, I hope we will remember, think about now, and remember during the shofar sounding and when we say the Musaf on the 2 days of Rosh Hashana. Okay, God willing, next week, I thought I would get to it this week. Okay, so next week we'll see, Be'ezer Hashem, a beautiful teaching about teshuvah and purification that's connected to this period of time, and particularly Yom Kippur. Okay, my friends, have a wonderful day and see you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining. Good to see you. Well, I'm about kind of seeing you.
Hopefully,
seeing you in essence.
Next one.
Well, you're seeing you in essence. This is deeper than the physical side. This is the soul. You went in Shul Shabbos, but Shabbos I spoke about why the bride is veiled. We had an ufruf. Why the bride is veiled under the chuppah. You'd think that there's one moment in a person's life, in her life, where she would not be veiled, where all of her beauty and her presence would be manifest in all of its glory. It's that moment of marriage under the chuppah, when they're taking each other to be husband and wife. That's when the face should be shining, and that's when you're looking into each other's eyes and seeing each other. If there's one time, it should be then. And no, that's the one time it's going to be veiled. That was my talk on Shabbos. So the explanation was because in the country it's much deeper than all of the virtues and the beauty and the revelations, the core essence. It's deeper, not less. Okay, so that's what's happening now.
Rabbi, you asked for a one word for each one. How about dedication, commitment, and redemption?
You could, but the word dedication is not I am. Dedication implies three things. There's me, there's the object, and I'm dedicated to it. The first one is it's much deeper than dedication.
Okay.
It's I am.
Okay.
The second one is like dedication. And what did you say the third one was?
Dedication, commitment, and redemption.
Yeah. So I like the last two.
I got 2 out of 3 is not bad.
2 out of 3 ain't bad.
2 out of 3 ain't bad. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
So dedication belongs more in the second one. You follow?
Yeah.
This is more than I am dedicated to. It's 3 things. Me,
Right.
and I am.
Right.
In other words, thank you for saying this, because I want to explain further. If we really embrace the I am, the rest will follow. They're not three things. It's one thing.
Right.
If we dedicated I am, then if I am, then how can I not be dedicated and express it? And how can it not then lead to redemption?
Right.
The one flows naturally from the other.
Right.
But the critical one is the I am.
Right.
And I am means there's no choice. It's who I am. I'm embracing there's no choice. The second one, therefore, is a choice, but also no choice in the end, because if it's who I am, then in the end, I have to be true to who I am. It's just nothing else will work. And then in the end result of that, it'll all be revealed, redemption. My
Right.
soul will be revealed, God revealed, and the veil will come off, as it were, and we will celebrate and enjoy each other forever as one. That's after the chuppah.
Okay.
All right, so thank you for that. You helped us clarify it and add some more insight. Okay, friends, so we'll see you, God willing, at Michael's, together with Michael's class, who would have joined this class too, mind you. He's here now too, but certainly at the 10:30, at 10.
10:15.
10:15, yeah. Okay, see you soon.
Okay.